Welcome and thank you for joining me for this presentation of the 2013 Kenyon College Alumni Survey results. This is the first webinar in a series that we have planned for the fall. Our next webinar will be in 2 weeks, and it will cover the Kenyon Fund goals and message for the coming year. To eliminate feedback issues, like I said, I had to mute you all for the duration, but there will be a Q&A. Today, though, I'll show you data and trends from the survey, along with some analysis and my thoughts. As always, though, I hope that you look at the data and form your own opinions as I show them to you. I'll start with a brief explanation of the survey's purpose and history, and I'll follow that with a generalized summary of the average alum, and then we'll dig a little deeper to look at alumni perceptions of, relationship with, and giving to Kenyon. So why do we send this survey out? First, it gives us a way to systematically research alumni opinions and analyze it with proven statistical tools. We even get to the point where we isolate variables like class year or gender or major, and we compare it to other subgroups. Second, it helps us identify areas of strengths and weaknesses that we must address. Third, we can use these findings to inform our strategic planning on campaigns, yearly engagement efforts, so on and so forth. Lastly, it's a great way to show alumni that we care about their opinion. Hopefully after seeing this, you can tell your friends that we do take this quite seriously, and a lot of time and energy is taken to look at what alumni think and feel. Not listed, but an also important use is relaying these to admissions. They can point to these figures and say, look, this is how happy alumni are with Kenyon after they graduate and what they think of their education. Here you see the sample pool for this iteration of the survey. This is our sixth survey since 1991, and it provides us with another survey set of longitudinal data for many of our questions. This survey has also had our greatest participation rate ever, with 41% responding, compared to 35% in 2007. All in all, we had 709 respondents that closely mirror the breakdown of the alumni body at large. It should be noted, though, that the retired, the young, and then women are slightly overrepresented compared to their total figures in the all alumni body. Just to keep that in mind. It wasn't anything too significant, but it's there. So after working on this data and analyzing it for over 2 months, I've formed the following overall impression. Kenyon alumni think very highly of a Kenyon education and believe the college is decently administered. They feel moderately informed about what is going on and like to keep their relationship with Kenyon fresh from time to time by connecting on and off campus. Lastly, giving to Kenyon is very important to them, but issues closer to home are strong competitors for their financial support. But now to get into some of the details, starting with alumni perceptions. Here you see that alumni generally have a stable view of Kenyon, with over 70% saying their views have not changed in the last 5 years. When those views did change, of this under 30%, more often than not, they improved, roughly 2 to 1 that it became a more positive perception. Then when asked to evaluate Kenyon as an institution, you can see a split between how they view academics and then the administration. These top 3 here being academics and these bottom 2 being administration. Those top 3 are quality of faculty, quality of students, and standing among peers. They're quite high and have been increasing steadily, although with diminishing rates of return. So you see here back in 91, slowly increasing, but still quite high. Conversely, though, evaluations of Kenyon as an administration, on the other hand, haven't seen these same highs or the consistency over time. You'll see these pretty big dips and rises, but then you see this dip here in the last survey. What we attribute that to is the uproar that happened with the maintenance contract last year. These surveys came out right after that, and we believe that dip is attributable to that. But then when assessing Kenyon's residual value, it still looks quite high. 97% say it provided a good liberal arts education, 89% would do it all over again, and 94% would recommend a high school student. And those are pretty good. Additionally, not on the screen because we didn't have longitudinal data for them, but 94% say that their writing skills that are essential to their work and life they learned at Kenyon. Skills as a critical thinker, 83% says that Kenyon taught them that. And then for people who did club sports, extracurriculars at Kenyon, like a singing group, they say that has enriched their life after leaving Kenyon. 73% of them say that. But here you see some challenges and perceptions for the college, as this slide illustrates. You see that alumni report they feel valued, but then they report that they don't think that Kenyon listens to them. Making it more difficult is that a large number of alumni don't understand Alumni Council, this line here, or what it does. So to kind of sum it up, we're faced with an alumni community that feels valued, but not listened to, and they don't understand that they have an advocate within the college that speaks for them. So having quickly gone through perceptions, let's see how they relate to Kenyon. Here you see the most important factor in alumni relationships with Kenyon. By far and away, friends while I was a student is the choice of all groups and every subgroup for what connects them to Kenyon. It's interesting to note, though, that my class over time is becoming a greater factor, and we rack this up to the result of our reunion model and class agent methods. Because if you look at young alumni, my class isn't as strong and they have more of an attachment to faculty and other alumni in their region, but over time that changes. And this does hold true against even people who are in fraternities and sororities. The graph looks roughly the same. Continuing on, though, college efforts to maintain their relationship rely greatly upon publications. Here we see which publications our alumni read and roughly how often. So you have class letters and alumni bulletin up here, the old annual report honor roll, which no longer exists, but people still think it does, and then Kenyon Fund mailings and the Kenyon News Digest, which is actually our email service, which took a break in the summer to retool and should be coming out shortly. But you see here that what I call old media, printed papers, continue to be our most read publications across the board. But then across the board you see these drops. It's interesting to note, though, that the one electronic medium is slightly increasing. That's something we have to keep our eye on going into the future and see if it's a direct correlation as all these go down, if that one goes up, and obviously we'll have to retool our methods. Going a bit deeper, though, we've also asked what publication made people feel most in touch with Kenyon, that warm, on the hill type of feeling. And again, you see here, old media has a very strong staying power. They're even more influential now than compared to 2007, which is the yellow. They could pick multiple different things that made them feel most in touch with Kenyon. That's why they won't add up to 100%. But what this here tells me is that our public affairs is putting out effective material if across the board people feel more influenced by them. You can't discuss connecting with people without talking about technology these days. Here we see that the great majority of our alumni do come to the Kenyon website, over 80%. And then when you look at that by subgroup, like graduates of the last 20 years, it's up in the high 90s. And then when you see that when they do come, they aren't just one note, they come back more often. And when they do look at the website, what are they looking at? This is a very general snapshot. There was a lot of variance between the subgroups, like retired, people 70s and 80s, athletes, Greek, young alumni. So it's hard to give a definitive picture here. But in general, you see alumni will go to alumni pages. Men will look at athletics pages more often. Women tend to look more at student life. Young alumni at academics and faculty notes. What this tells me, though, is that this could be a prime source for cross-marketing in the future, since there's just so much variance of where people look. And what about social media? That's the thing these days. We see here that over 70% of alumni use it. And again, when you break it down for people who are post-70, 1970 graduation, post-1980, it really skyrockets up into the 90s again. And we see here that there is a corresponding interest, but to be honest with you, there is a lot of missing responses for this in the survey, so it's hard to draw definitive conclusions on this question in particular. But there is something there, obviously. So internet, social media, old media, what does it all add up to? In the end, an alum that feels moderately informed about Kenyon. Even in this era of mass communication, you see that we're at about the same level as we are in 1991. My theory is that this is simply the area that people want to be at. If you look at the data, you see that people report we either send them just the right amount of mail, which is 88 to 90% of people, or too much, which is another like 5 to 6. So if we're sending about 96% of the audience enough information, and this is how they report, I suspect that is where they want to be. And now it's time for me to show my annual giving colors. Time to talk about giving to Kenyon. You'll see here the rankings of giving priorities over the past couple of surveys in 2013, 2007, and 2003. And for the first time in 10 years, Kenyon has finally reclaimed the #1 spot, beating out place of worship. I hope that we can avoid a scourge of plagues after beating out the churches, but it's good to be back up on top. It's also worthwhile to point out that this holds true across all subgroups, young alumni, older alumni, large donors, non-donors. Kenyon has the top spot. And you'll also see that we have the first, second, and third spot compared to these other organizations. When looking into the specifics in giving, though, loyalty to the college and gratitude for education received remain the greatest factors. But in an interesting theme that I mentioned a little bit earlier, you should see here that loyalty to class is spiking over time. Well, not spiking, but surging. Slowly but surely, it's becoming more important. And you'll see on this next slide that it actually equals the leadership of the president as a factor in giving. But going back one, here you see Kenyon's financial aid doesn't seem to be that, it's dropped a little bit in significance compared to the last survey. I attribute this to Kenyon being a victim of its own success. As people see all these new facilities being built, they kind of stop and question themselves, well, what do they need? They seem pretty set. And that will be a challenge going into our next campaign, when and if that happens, to get around that obstacle. But back to that second slide, you see these other notable factors in giving that are less important but still influential. So here you see college leadership, tax deductions, financial aid as a student. They vary widely by subgroup, with larger donors ranking college leadership much higher. Obviously, financial aid students rank financial aid assistance as a student as a bigger reason. But not on this chart is a new question that we didn't have longitudinal data for, but it's very important. And that question is contact by Kenyon volunteer. If you look at it by subgroup, anywhere from a quarter to a third of alumni rank it as important or very important. If you crudely extrapolated, that would equal about 2,000 donors, or roughly $1.5 million for the annual fund. So if anyone ever asks you, like, oh, what do you do, what effect do you have, you can, those are some rough numbers, that the effect you have as a class agent or as a volunteer for Kenyon. Not listed but important to discuss is why alumni don't give. The most common reason cited by far is that they cannot afford it. which is easy to say and hard to argue against. But with our goal this year focusing on participation, it might just be easy to say, well, what about a couple bucks? I mean, you skip a coffee for a day and you can contribute to an ambitious goal for Kenyon. Lastly here, we see what alumni want to donate towards. In general, it's financial aid, the Kenyon Fund, and the endowment. The combination of these three are always the top three, depending on subgroup, but just in different order. For instance, younger alumni place financial aid, then the endowment, then the Kenyon Fund, whereas large donors place Kenyon Fund, endowment, financial aid. One thing that you can say to your peers is that you can contribute to financial aid through the Kenyon Fund, and that takes pressure off the endowment. So in theory, by giving to the Kenyon Fund, you've just taken care of the three top priorities that alumni list. To end on a bit of a lighter note, though, my boss, Sean Daly, has pointed out that the lowest priority in the survey is historically the one that gets taken care of next. And guess what's being built right next door? The student health facilities. So who knows, maybe in a couple years we'll see a library built. Thanks for joining me today and everything you do for Kenyon. I'm going to turn the speakers back on here, but feel free to call me or email me with any questions you may have. So there you go. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Well, I'll open it up. Again, thank you for taking the time today to listen.
Again, thank you for taking the time today to listen.
Any questions?
Any questions?
Sean, on the going back a couple of slides when you reflected on the issue of the union negotiations or failure to have union negotiations with the
Administration?
With the administration, and you thought that was a definite potential reason for the drop.
Yeah.
Yeah, you may have. I see competence of administration and financial strength of the college. I was wondering why they thought the financial strength went down. You think that was because of the recession, or were there other factors that would impact on that?
It's possible, but you see, after talking with my Sean Daly for a while and just the success of our campaigns over the last couple of years, I'm not sure how much people would rack that up to the recession versus what they see we've been spending our money on. Some people might take issue with these capital projects and think they're a waste of money, and I think that might explain why they view it in lower light.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Then the other question I had on social media, I was wondering when you were looking at that, the breakdown by, I think you said from 70 on,
Mm-hmm.
did you not find a lot of use less use in the six classes of the 60s? Or?
Generally, the older the class, the less use of social media that we saw. I think that's in keeping with probably wider societal trends. For instance, I believe graduates the last 10 years, it was up there like 95, 97%.
Okay.
And it is interesting to note, though, I mean, granted there was a lot of missing data for this question in particular, but young alumni were about 5 times as likely to say Facebook was what connected the most to Kenyon, which is actually interesting to me even as a young alumni.
Yeah, I was surprised to see, we had a Facebook page for our last reunion, and we didn't get a lot of response. But I see more response just generally on Facebook about Kenyon, and of course, I know you're putting stuff up there, but I think the college does as well. And if you use Facebook on a daily basis or periodic basis, then you tend to pick up on stuff like that. And a lot more information than what comes in from the alumni bulletin on a quarterly basis then?
Yeah, definitely. Are there any other questions? And I'll open up the floor. I mean, it doesn't have to be about the survey. You're welcome to ask me an opinion about things on campus right now or any updates if you'd like.